45. All right, Gen Zers, listen up. I guess that Gen Z is wanting to be financially independent by age 32, and we've got lots of questions. What does it mean to be financially independent, you know, from your parents?
And is 32, how does that compare with, I mean, like the boomers, weren't they a lot of them?
16?
Yeah, exactly. My parents got married at like 21.
You know, we'll get into our opinions, but financial expert Scott G. Kyle is here this morning to talk to us about it. Good morning, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Good morning.
Okay, so Scott, my opinion on this is that you should be financially independent when you get cut off from your parents' insurance, which I believe is, what is it, 25 or 27?
Age 25, indeed. Yes. No, that could be a definition. It's really however you define financial independence, but there's some basic concepts to it. And one is that you're not relying on other people. That could be the government, your parents, or even a job, so that you've built up enough wealth so that you have freedom and choices and control over your life. And you're not really beholden to others. So that's the ultimate definition of financial independence, but people can define it really any way that they want. But certainly not living in your parents' basement. That would not be considered.
Okay, so Gen Z, they don't even want to have a job. They want to be so financially independent that they don't need a job for income.
Yeah, it's surprising, but it's actually achievable, even at the age of 32. And so really, you know, one could have an income of $1 million and not be financially independent because they overspend. We talk about that in the book we wrote, where people are sort of Instagram rich and they appear to be very wealthy, but they aren't living within their means. We can talk about that. Or you could have a modest income, and if you start early enough, you can develop financial independence even in your 30s. So it's really just a matter of how you're managing your finances and creating those passive income streams that would supplant support from, again, your parents, the government, or even a job.
What is an example? Let's take that middle example where you mentioned, you know, the possibility of having a moderate income, but then kind of more of a simpler lifestyle by your early 30s. What's an example of some of that passive income that you just mentioned?
Sure, and if you start early enough, you can really create these income streams that compound or grow over time. So, for example, let's say you have your first job, and your employer offers a 401k or some type of retirement plan. So, if you put some money aside using the 50-30-20 rule, being spend 50% of your income on your needs, things like housing, 30% of your money on things that you want, so going out with friends, going to parties, things like that, and then 20% of your income into savings. So if you really emphasize that savings part, especially early, because the earlier that you start saving, the more money works for you. Think of money as like little agents out there working on your behalf. And so if you put them away and let them work, they actually multiply and compound over time. So if you start saving, in this case, in a retirement account, a 401k, fairly early on, then the compounding effect, which is money earning money, so not you earning the money, but your money earning money for you. Again, think about having little workers out there working for you. That can really have a powerful effect over time. But the key to that sentence is over time. It doesn't happen overnight. And often people want to try to get rich quickly, which is very difficult to do. But if you start early, put systems in place and automate those systems, then you wake up one day, you're 32 years old, and you've built up great passive income. So that can be in the form of stocks that pay dividends, and those companies will pay regular dividends every 90 days or so. It could be owning an income property, like a rental property, where you put down a down payment, things like that. Those would be examples of great passive income sources.
Yeah, I was going to say the 401k wouldn't really be a passive income that you could dip in because you got to wait till you retire. But that's a great goal. So 32, they just don't want to work anymore. They want to save when they're in their 20s and then be debt-free and rocking and rolling into retirement at 32. Let's talk about, I'm reading here a couple of things about the holidays. So it looks like Gen Zs want to spend less money on holidays this year as opposed to previous years.
Yeah, really, any spending should come with a plan. And so, just like you wouldn't go to Hawaii without a plan and a return ticket, you don't want to send your money off on a one-way ticket and not have a means to come back. So going into the holidays where you may want to overspend, it's good to have a plan and a budget, really coming back to the basics. As I mentioned before, the idea of the 50-30-20 rule. So the 50% of your needs could be making sure your rent is covered, paying down any debts, The 30% could be wants, things like traveling to visit family, going to holiday parties, things like that. And then the 20%, you just make sure that you, for example, max out your retirement account, your 401k, and pay off any debts. And so by having a plan, you can get through the holidays without ending up with a New Year's hangover, as it were, a financial hangover.
Scott, let me ask you how much has changed compared to previous generations. Caitlin and I were talking about, my parents, for example, I'm older than Caitlin, but they were married with kids in their early 20s. We have been talking so much this year about inflation. Back in my parents' day, I know the mortgage rates were a little higher, but the homes were more affordable based on typical income levels. A lot of those dynamics have changed here in 2025. How is that impacting Gen Z's ability to attain this level of independence?
Yeah, great point and great question. Every generation faces, different opportunities and challenges, and that could come from different technology, cultural shifts, things like that. So I remember, for example, I'm a bit older than the two of you, but when I was in my early teens, I had a paper route. This is back in Chicago, actually, in the 70s.
Nice.
I would deliver papers in the snow and in the heat of summer, but I would have to go out and literally collect the money from my customers, and in $1 and $5 bills, then put it into a savings account. These days, kids rarely even see money or even know what it is. So they have technology which can facilitate good habits, but it also can prompt some bad habits as well, because with the digital economy, when you spend money, it doesn't seem real, right? The tap of a button, you can spend $100 without even actually physically seeing it. Whereas in my day, we would have to bring out the roll of 1s and 5s and 20s. So on the one hand, technology can be detrimental because it reduces the friction to spend money. On the other hand, technology through budgeting apps, things like that, can help you automate systems to facilitate that savings and create that passive income that we were talking about before.
So Gen Z is using, speaking of technology, AI to help them save money. So they're really wrapping their arms around the new technology. Is there ways that us older generations could also use AI to help us save?
Absolutely, yeah, it's accessible to everyone. I recently started using ChatGPT just because my kids gave me so much grief for not even knowing what it was. And indeed, it's been a great resource for me on all fronts, including financial. So there are great resources out there that exist today. Again, back in the day, I had my stack of encyclopedias up on my shelf when I would have to study and look things up. But now it's really at your fingertips. So I would encourage people to really educate themselves, whether that's through reading books like the one that we wrote or through prompting on ChatGPT to try to address any issues that they have in front of them. And so that can be a great resource as well.
Okay. One question I had kind of on the parental side, in terms of encouraging, when you talk about how some kids don't even know, like they've never seen cash, sometimes I get the impression that my oldest, my 9-year-old, doesn't have an idea of like, hey, Theo, those Jordans cost $100. Okay, do you know the fact that that's $100? Like that's 10 allowances you could save up for 10 weeks. He just, because he's not seeing those denominations, it can be hard. What can we do as parents to maybe instill a little of the groundwork in our kids to have an appreciation for the value of money and encourage them to save?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, the first thing that we can do, like with anything in life, is just be a great role model. So really model out the kinds of behaviors you want for them in terms of being prudent and wise with your money. But education and communication is also really key. Part of the reason why we named the book "The Other Birds and Bees" is the idea of kind of the sex talk that parents, myself included, as a parent of 2 teenagers, are often reluctant to have with their kids. But really, talking to them and making it fun and interesting and relatable is very, very important. So, for example, my kids would give me so much grief when I would stop at Starbucks, in any city that we were in, and like, Dad, do we have to go to Starbucks again? So what I did is I actually bought them a few shares of Starbucks in their small, little custodial accounts, their savings accounts. And now when we go into Starbucks, they say, oh, thank you, all the customers. You're giving me a penny for everything that you buy in the form of, my Starbucks gain. So again, just doing things that create that connection with your kids and make it relatable is a great way to educate. Setting up a small account that you contribute a few dollars, and then talk to them about what kinds of stocks you may want to buy. Do you want to buy Amazon? Do you want to buy Google? Do you want to buy Nike? How do you spend your money, child? And then would that be a good investment for you for the long term? So those are some things you can do to make it fun as well.
Okay, so Scott, I want to bring this up because we were going to talk about it earlier, but we decided we were going to wait and just bring it up with you because it's a very interesting topic. I guess this Wall Street portfolio manager named Michael Green has gone viral for a blog post saying that the new poverty line for a family of 4 in America is $140,000 a year, which to me, that just blows my mind. But Anthony, I know it breaks down the different costs for families these days.
So the Department of Health and Human Services set the federal poverty level at like $32,000. So this viral post breaks it down. Childcare, 32 grand a year. Housing, 23 grand a year. Food, 14 grand a year. Transportation, 14. Healthcare, 10. Other essentials, 21. And then he put taxes at 18,500. Now, I don't know if he means property taxes there or just all the sales tax we're spending. But how do you react to that in terms of, you're a finance guy. Is there a method to this number that he came up with 140 grand a year?
Yeah, it really brings the conversation full circle, which is to say that you could make a lot of money and not live within your means and really live as though you're in poverty, in a sense of being underwater, being stressed out, living paycheck to paycheck. And here in very wealthy Southern California, we see that quite a lot, where people are, as I said before, sort of Instagram rich. Or you could have less income, certainly less than 140,000, and be financially independent or on your way to being financially independent. So, it's easy to spend money that you make. It's harder to save it. And so I guess you could really define poverty any way you want. And I could come up with a lot of ways to spend money to get over that poverty line. But I think it's an interesting concept. And I think it really just comes down to the basics of that 50-30-20 rule and making sure that you're putting money aside for the future you, and then being responsible with the rest of your money.
I like this. So, let's before we let you go, I want to dive a little bit further into the 50-30-20 rule. Okay, what is a good way to accomplish that? I know that, for example, we have a certain, every time we get a certain deposit to our checking, I think something automatically goes into our savings. Okay, so we've automated that. That feels good, right? How do we achieve this 50-30-20 without having to work real hard at it each month, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, I'm a very goal-oriented person, and goals are very important. So having a goal of saving or covering your needs and so forth is important. What's even more important, in addition to goals, is the idea of systems, which you really hit on. The more that you can create systems that are automatic and simple, the easier it is to achieve really any goal in life, whether it's physical or financial or otherwise. And we really think about the idea of being healthy in multiple areas: your brain, your body, and your bank account. So in the case of your finances, by creating those automatic systems and using technology to do so, that's what's going to make it not only easier but stick. Because we're heading into the holidays. People often have these grandiose goals for the new year. I'm going to go and work out and lose 10 pounds. And then by January 14th, that motivation's gone. Whereas if you put a system in place that's automatic, that system will live long beyond your motivations and desires and even goals that maybe you wrote down but put in a drawer somewhere. So you really nailed it by the idea of creating those automatic systems that will just take care of themselves over time.
That's good stuff. Scott G. Kyle, thank you, sir, for your expertise. Happy holidays to you.